Welcome, everyone. My name is Steve Goodman, and I am the Director of Michigan's Integrated Behavior and Learning Support Initiative, and want to welcome you to this webinar on what building teams should ask of their districts. Within this, I'm also a partner with the PBIS Center, so I want to talk about the idea of how districts can support the building teams and what the building team should be asking. So during this presentation, we have a couple polls for you to respond to, opportunity for some questions, but please feel free to type in questions as we go along too, and be happy to answer along the way. So again, welcome. This is what building teams should ask of their districts. So I want to start out with just a little analogy. So we have been working with our project with schools and districts for implementation for since 2000, so a number of years here. And what we have found is some things that happen along the way. If you think about it, I drive along the state here and I see some really nice buildings that they're painted, a brand new coat of paint. And then over time, what I notice is that it starts to fade and cracking and peeling away. And that same analogy tends to happen when we look at implementation efforts. So for example, here's some data from our project. And these are cohorts of schools. So the first cohort were 23 schools. Second cohort was 50 schools. Third cohort was 90. And so we added cohorts each year. And what you see with the columns, this is fidelity implementation, and we were using the team implementation checklist at that time. The taller the columns, the better it is for implementation with fidelity, doing things correctly. What you should see is as the fidelity is dropping off, as the bars are going down, the dots represent problem behavior, and the problem behavior started increasing as the fidelity is dropping off. So just like the analogy of paint fading and chipping as time goes on, the same thing can happen around the implementation efforts. So if you think about it, we really want to make sure we're doing the right thing and we keep that moving forward so that students can benefit. So it's around fidelity and sustainability of efforts. And what throughout this presentation, I would like to suggest that the district plays a key role in helping with fidelity of implementation and sustainability. So when we talk about fidelity of implementation, you know, the idea is are we implementing the practices correctly, consistently over time? Because we know that students can't really benefit from these interventions if they're not exposed to those. Jessica and so Swain, Bradway, and Freeman, in looking at high schools, said initial findings indicate that almost at fidelity is not enough. So the data really show that there's little difference between schools that are not implementing and those that are implementing almost at fidelity. So it's almost like a threshold effect. So take it one step further. This is from Phil Strain, and he said that kind of the myth here, if you look at the blue line on the top here, as fidelity goes up, we should see student outcomes improve. The reality is that threshold. Until we meet that threshold of fidelity, students don't really notice that we're doing something different. And because of that, we're not seeing the changes. So put that in perspective. Schools can go forward, they can implement things, but they can only go so far with sustainability and fidelity without the district support. And we can really enhance that with district support. Here's one more example of fidelity. So this is an elementary school we're working with, and you can see this is for Tier 1 fidelity using the tiered fidelity inventory. Starting out in February 2nd, 2016, you can see the trend is going up. We can also measure not only student outcomes, but the perception. So starting in March of 2016, you can see gradual increase of the school climate perception. So fidelity is not only important for looking at the change of behavior, but it's also the perception of how effective that is. And you can measure, these two things, the school climate and fidelity implementation, by downloading these tools from the PBIS.org website. So those are just some examples. If we want to produce good outcomes, we have to make sure staff are supported, and we can measure that with the tools that are available. So here's what I'd like to suggest. Schools can implement with a good school leadership team, but as the example I used with the paint, chipping, and fading, it can be enhanced through district supports. And I would like to suggest there's three main categories of district supports, so that when we work in a school level, schools should ask districts of these three things. One, we want to make sure we have effective leadership and management from the district level. Two, we want to make sure that there's access to good professional development, so staff in our schools can implement this, well, they know what we should be doing, how to do it. And then the third is we need to have effective environments. So we would ask the district to help promote effective environments. Now, those supports can help the school team, school leadership team, but they can also help school staff, and ultimately it will result in effective PBIS implementation so that we can get effective student outcomes. Now, when we break it down for the leadership and management, if we are asking the district to provide good leadership and management, what that would do for us at the school level will be help to clarify what it is that we should be doing, what we need to do, why we should be doing it, because with the emphasis from the district, they can provide much greater input on why it's important for the district, for the schools, for the community, and assurance that the leadership and management can provide assistance to get this work done. Through the professional development, what we're asking for from the school teams is, how to do it. How can we be trained so that we are competent to actually implement positive behavior support with fidelity? And the third, the promoting effective environments. What that will do when we ask districts to provide that for us is, how do we make the workplace, the setting at the school level, make it easy to do it, to implement positive behavior support, and easy to do it right? And it's kind of important in that sequence. So first, we are suggesting having good leadership and management and the professional development, and then setting up the environment so that all that can take place in a sustainable manner. So that sequence is important to us to produce the fidelity of implementation. So leadership and management, it's what to do, why do it, and assistance to get it done. That's what we're asking for leadership and management at the district team. So when we, if we can provide a description of that, it's a process for influencing and coordinating the different components of the educational system. The educational system that schools are nested within the district. And it's to effectively maximize efforts so that we can implement PBIS with fidelity and durability, which again, we want to do it right, and we want to do it for a long time. To do that, we ask that the district can lead with a team, because we know that there's changeover at the district level, but if there's multiple people there, it will help us out with continuity. It will also help us out with the perspective of what it means to do this well, people who understand it, but also perspective of those with policy. Here is when I talk about a team at a district level. Here's what we have been using within our project. So we say there is a cabinet level team, which would be the executive administration. That would be superintendent, assistant superintendent, director of special education, Director of Student Services, who's ever on that cabinet level, Human Resources, the Chief Financial Officer, we would go in and say, we understand that this work is important. It's helpful if you provide a vision and facilitate this administration of this work and help us out with selecting the right people to do it. And then we ask at the implementation team, so there's a separate team at the district that involves somebody from that cabinet. Typically, it's the assistant superintendent for instruction or special ed director, along with a planning team, so a total of 5 to 7 individuals who understand what the practices are, who also have authority to make decisions and to create a plan for developing support for the schools. Then that team helps to create training and coaching and providing resources to each of the schools to help implement it well. So when we say lead with a team, there could be a couple teams depending on the size of the district, but we really need somebody who, a group of individuals who can create a plan and who can help develop capacity to support schools for implementation. When we look at leadership and management, again, what to do, why should I do it, and assistance to get it done. Leadership and management, there's key components. We want the leadership and management to provide vision from the district level. What does this fit into? How does this fit into the school improvement process for the district? How does it fit key goals that the district's trying to accomplish? We want to look at commitment and political support. Many times our schools are faced with such changeover from the executive administrative level that they are fearful that this initiative will go away, or we have selected it with the previous administration and now there's going to be a change of plan. So we want to make sure there's commitment, political support. We also are asking from leadership and management to say, how can you help secure funding for this work? And how can we allocate resources to make sure that we can do this well? Across all this, we know that there should be coordination. And in the coordination, we look at things like alignment of making sure that we are differentiating support as needed, looking at data that would help out with problem solving, and then to communicate for all those involved. So the district leadership team that we say at a building level, we ask you as a district leadership to help create a culture of competence around these effective practices. And when we say culture of competence, we say from the district level, you can provide a common vision, common expectations for doing this work, common experiences that this is a good thing to do and you will be recognized for doing it and supported, and a common language that this is part of our culture. This is what we do within our district. The other thing is if you consider a cascading educational system that starts out with educators at the school level who are supporting students, then we have a school leadership team who are supporting educators, the district leadership team supporting the school leadership team, and then the regional supports and expand up to the state. The role that we're asking for the district leadership team is help us communicate across all those levels of the system. Help us to problem solve and align efforts, because there are things that come from the state requirements that may be helpful, but they also may cause some challenges, and the district can help navigate and problem solve and alignment across these cascading system. One thing I appreciate about Elmore's approach here is saying that for every increment of performance I demand from you, I have an equal responsibility to provide you with the capacity to meet that expectation. So from a district, if I'm saying you should be implementing positive behavior support, I should have a responsibility from that district to provide you with capacity to meet that expectation. And we do that by this kind of model here. So if you think about it, at the far left is the classroom level, and that moves up to a grade level in school, district, region, and country or state here. As we look at this, it is as we move across, the closer we are to the classroom, the more we should be concerned about specific practices that are involved in PBIS. So at the classroom level, we want to make sure that students know what expectations are, that they are taught those expectations, that when students are engaged in appropriate behavior expectations, we recognize that, acknowledge, reinforce. And when students are engaging in challenging behavior, we want to make sure that we're using corrective consequences. The intensity of that, of course, increases based on student need. Now, as we move further away from the classroom to this grade level school district, the further we're away from the students, we are suggesting that you should focus more on supporting infrastructure. So more of our time should be spent on how do we support teachers to teach behavior expectations and less on what those behavior expectations are. So that's just a rubric that we have found helpful for depending on what level of the system we are trying to support. And again, from a building standpoint, building teams should be asking for more supporting infrastructure from the district. So within this, there's a couple tools that you can find for helping for the district to develop that capacity and support. One is the Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports Implementation Blueprint. There are two parts. There's the foundation part, part one, and the second part is the evaluation assessment. Both can be downloaded from the PBIS.org website, and it's a useful tool for districts to help move forward with this work. The second is a district capacity assessment, or DCA, and this comes from the work from National Implementation Research Network, along with the SISEP, the statewide scaling up of evidence-based practices. So this tool really looks at capacities, which could be independent of any specific program you're implementing. Where the first one was specific around positive behavior support. The capacity assessment is looking at any type of effective program you're trying to support. Now, when we ask a district to say, how are you going to support us? We look at, here's an example from Port Huron. They graciously gave me permission to share some of their excellent data. So what you can see using a capacity assessment, over the years, the district increased the level of capacity that they have to support schools to implement well. There are 16 schools in the district. On the right side, these are an average of fidelity across the district of those schools who are implementing. So you can see that the capacity is increasing and fidelity is increasing. What my takeaway from this is they are not only measuring fidelity, but they're investing in the district to help support the schools. The second takeaway is that we think we know that schools can implement positive behavior support. They can implement it up to, with fidelity. But what we are finding is it's hard to get all schools in the district to do that well without the district support. So seeing that Port Huron is able to increase that capacity and the fidelity across time is pretty meaningful. So here's the first poll. There's going to be a poll that pops up here for you. And if you could answer this, do you have a district level leadership implementation team support implementation for school level? And as people are answering the poll, Valerie, I see that you said, when will a presentation be available? I believe it will be really soon after the webinar today. Okay, looking at the poll, we have 7 folks who are saying that yes, there is a leadership team at the district level. 1 saying no, there's not, and then no one saying not sure. So what is interesting through all this is people get the idea how important it is to have a leadership team at the district for those reasons we talked about. I think the next question that we would have is to say, how effective is that team, and are the individuals doing the right thing? Because there's always opportunity for improvement along the way. So thank you for answering the poll here. One other thing that we're finding for the district level leadership team is that the district level team should help us out through stages of implementation. And if you can think about stages of implementation, back when I first started, this work early on, we were happy that people would show up for training, and then we expect after people attend training on Tuesday, they would go back on Thursday and begin to implement it. And then we were less satisfied that the implementation wasn't done well. So some of the work that came out of the National Implementation Research Network, NERN, is saying that if you think about it, there's stages of implementation. First stage is exploration adoption. We have to identify if this is important work for us to do and then commit to doing it. The second stage is installation. We set up, we set the stage for this work to take place. And part of that would make sure that we have training, coaching, people identified. We have the system set up. We have a team. Then we actually try it out through initial implementation. We learn what works. We look at what needs to be addressed. How do we modify it? And finally, continuous improvement, regeneration. For that, we've been doing it for a while, and we want to make it easier to implement. We want to adjust implementation based on the changing needs, because we know demographics change, we know staff turnover, we know that requirements from the state and from the district changes over time. So how do we make sure that we constantly improve this work? So as a leadership team at a school, we should ask the district, how are you going to help me based on the stage that we are at for the school? So when we look at exploration and adoption, the very first stage, what we would ask from the district is to say, help us understand how PBIS, what it is. Help us understand, from you folks at the district level, how does this fit into the district vision? How does it address student need within our school and also within the district and community? And then we also ask for district level teams to say, how are you going to communicate your support for implementation? Is this going to be something you just want us to do, or is this something you're going to help us to make sure we're doing it well? And is this just one thing that we're going to do this year, or is it something that's going to be part of a long-term plan? So exploration adoption, we want district to help us out with this first stage. We sometimes look at something called a hexagon tool just to say, as a district, help us to say, is this the right thing to do based on the need that we have for our students, the evidence that this will work, the fit that this fits into our culture of our school, and help us to show that we can do it right. Is there capacity from the district to help support us and the necessary resources available to do it well? We also asked at district level to, at the very beginning, how do we make room for this work to take place by braiding different initiatives? So if you think about it, districts have things like restorative practices, programs for trauma-informed care, social-emotional learning, along with PBIS. It's helpful for the district team to say, we're going to braid these together to make it easy for the work room for the work to take place. The other thing that we need from the district is at the initial level when we're setting things up is how do we, again, making room for this, over the history of work in schools, we keep adding on initiatives and we get buried alive. We get so many things that are happening that we can't take one more thing. So what we are suggesting is that the district help us know how to get rid of some things, help us remove those initiatives that are not effective or burdensome or not producing outcomes. So for the installation, we set up teams, we establish data systems, we help create a support plan, make room for the PBIS implementation, as I was mentioning, with braiding and looking for removing initiatives. So the installation, it's not even to a point where the students would be experiencing positive behavior support yet. The installation is setting up so that we can get ready to do that work. What we have found is if we don't spend time in installation, it is really hard to begin to implement. Another thing is if we don't invest well in the proper exploration and installation, when we implement and it fails, sometimes we call it false start. It is hard to recover from those false starts. It's hard to go back to staff and say, hey, you know that didn't work. Let's try it again. Because people say, well, why is it different now? Why should we do it again when it didn't work at first? So part of the installation that we're finding is really important to set up data systems. And of course, you can use the school-wide information system, which SWIS can really help at a school level. We work with districts to say, you know, how are we going to set this with our student information system that's adopted by the school? How can we make sure that there's time and resources to actually use a system like this? Because this is a subscription. Or in our case, we have actually developed a system that looks at outcomes for behavior and fidelity and you know, the capacity to do the work, and we can compare student outcomes with the actual fidelity of implementation. So we need a district to say, yes, here's issues around setting up the system. We're going to help you to make it easy to do. So the initial implementation, if you think about it now, we asked the district to help us explore why we should do this and get your support to support us. We've asked the district to help us install by creating teams, creating you know, a training plan, creating things like training our staff and creating data systems. Now we're going to do it in the schools, and to try it out, we know that this is probably the most fragile time period because implementing it takes a lot of work, and it is something different that people may not be used to doing. So we want to help manage the risks. We want the district to help us manage those risks, to provide considerable amounts of encouragement. What's interesting is in the area I live in, around New Year's, right after New Year's Day in January, we see a lot of advertisements for exercise, treadmills, stationary bikes, elliptical machines. So you think about it, it's after people have made commitments in their New Year's resolution. What's interesting, in spring, we see a lot of those out in garage sales with the idea that it's hard to change behavior. So given that, how do we have the district provide a lot of encouragement to help us through these kind of shaky times? Here's an example of that. This is a district that we were working with. There's 13 elementary schools in this district. On the left side there are 5 schools who did not meet fidelity of implementation. On the right side, there are 8 schools who did meet fidelity. So there's 13 total, 5 on the left, 8 on the right. What we have found from one year to the next, that the schools that did not meet fidelity, their problem behaviors actually increased by 8%. The schools on the right who did meet fidelity, their problem behavior decreased by almost 15%. Now, when you think about it, these schools that we were working with, all of them were saying that they were implementing positive behavior support. They were all trained in positive behavior support. They all had their expectations. They were posted. They were, the folks were getting ready to move forward. The trouble is, the schools who did not meet fidelity did not have enough of it in place for the students to experience success. When you think about what that means for implementation and support from the district, if you've been working so hard to do this and your students are getting worse, it's very easy to give up, right? To say, no, this doesn't work. Let's throw this all out. We shouldn't do this. There's not a return on investment. The district can really help us out by saying, keep your eye on the prize. Keep your eye on the thought that we need to implement with fidelity. We need to make sure that we keep doing this enough so that we can start seeing benefits for the students. So that's a really important part for this stage in the district support. Another thing to consider is when we start implementing something new, there's a lot of turbulence, there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of trying to figure it out. And what we would suggest is turbulence is not necessarily a bad thing. Take the analogy, I'm flying along, the pilot comes on and says, please take your seats. It's going to be bumpy here for a little bit. And we're going to try to find, go up to 40,000 feet and see if we can get smoother air. And what happens is, after we're up there, the pilot can say, you can take your seatbelts off. It looks like a smooth ride, and we have a tailwind that we're going to get there 15 minutes early to the gate. So without the turbulence, we may not have found, things to help us out to make it even better. So here's the idea: is that going through this rough stage, turbulence can be helpful. And I just saw, Kelly, you said, do you have ideas of how to support schools who have mindsets about punishment and what to do with students, get them out? And in my understanding, you're saying things like, how do we move them away from my classroom, maybe to another school, because, just changing the mindsets and work on that. Some real quick things that we have found is that it's more meaningful if the district is helping us out with that mindset, right? Versus that this is only something that's happening for within the school. Another thing that we have found is that if we can talk to key leaders who are trying some things out in the school, teachers who are thought of well, those who have done it, perhaps in other schools in the district, who can share the idea that this can work, and who can also demonstrate that there's support to help with the students. Because often what we're finding is people are told to do something, but they don't know what to do, and they're not supported in supporting these kids. So it's kind of the package. So that's some quick ideas, but. So with the next idea, continuous improvement regeneration, it's the idea of we implemented it, and now how do we even make it better? So we asked the district to help us make it easy, assist us in making adjustments based on need. When we have new staff coming in, how do we orient new staff? Or how do you even hire new staff that the district can help us out to select those who are most able and most willing? And then how does a district help provide ongoing professional development, or at least secure access to professional development? The idea through all this is that we're never done, right? We're never really going to get down at getting better. We have to work at it every time. So with the nomads, stop asking me if we're almost there. For we're nomads, for crying out loud. The work is never done. We always keep moving forward with continuous improvement. It's also important with the district to say, boy, remember that thing we did last week? We're not going to do it anymore. Sometimes you hear that. So it's important for the district to say, no, we need to keep this. We need to keep focused because it is distracting to go for those shiny things. So here's your next poll. Does your district systematically review school-level PBIS implementation information for continuous improvement? So I see as it's going forward, looks like 2 people are saying yes and 2 are no, and then not sure. So what we do know as, I'll let you keep answering here for a minute. Okay. So looking at this, what we do know is that particularly for continuous improvement, we need to look at the data, make adjustments to supporting schools for moving forward. But again, it's identifying what's a team who's responsible for it at district level. What work should they be doing? What data should they be looking at? How often should they be doing it? And do they know what to do with that information, right? So it's a complex issue that we need districts to help support us. So thank you. So professional development. How do, with the idea of professional development, we have staff and we want to make sure that our educators in our schools know how to do it right, how to implement positive behavior support. So we want to improve educators' competency to implement PBIS with fidelity and through developing their knowledge, skills, and ability. So with the professional development, of course, there's issues around training. We want to make sure the district is helping us provide training or access to training if they don't provide it directly, coaching supports, and technical assistance. Now, when we look at this idea of these components, training, what we're saying training is specific sessions that help with formal activities designed for skill development. So training is efficient when it's larger groups. You're bringing folks together, you're delivering content, and that content should be something that people don't know. If they already know and you're providing training, it's probably not a good use of the training. The coaching is ensuring that we can transfer from the training into actual practice setting, and it's helping to contextualize it. I'm sure you've been at settings where high school teams were trained with elementary teams. When examples were provided for elementary level, high school folks are shutting down, saying this has nothing to do with what we do. A coach can help and say, you know, the idea is how do we make sure we're, for example, acknowledging appropriate student behavior. Now, elementary school, they were using those stickers or whatever. High school, you know, we're more sophisticated. How can we really identify to acknowledge students for appropriate behavior? Probably involving the students, right? So things like that, coaching helps to ensure and contextualize. Technical assistance, what we're finding is that there's sometimes a problem that occurs that you really need an expert to come in and help us solve that issue. Getting back to Kelly, your idea about individual student who's struggling, I could need training and coaching for me to develop my skills, but I also would need an expert to come in and help support, create a plan for that individual student. So here's something from Karen Blasi, and she has this created this matrix saying that if you think about it, we differentiate coaching based on skills and the context. So at the context level, if it's something that the educator is familiar, or if it's something that's brand new. So if this is very new, you have an educator who has never implemented positive behavior support, trying to learn about it. and they don't have the skills in that, take a high level of intensity. If you have an educator who has past experience on that, they've established those skills, they're familiar with this work, it's a low level of intensity. So it's just a way to differentiate coaching. So far we talked about asking from leadership team that one, they provide leadership and management to help support us at the school level. Two, they help us out with professional development. And three is this item here of promoting effective environments. Promoting effective environments. So if I'm in the school, how do you make it really easy for me to implement positive behavior support correctly? So we want to develop a nurturing work environment, making it easy, making it successful places so that I know what needs to be done. I've got the resources to do it, and I can experience the results of my effective implementation efforts. So I can see what happens after I implement it. So here, I like this quote from Mark Duran saying students are doing the best they can given their skills, abilities, and the quality environments. We changed it a little bit to say educators are doing the best they can given their skills and ability and the quality of their environments. So professional learning helps develop skills and abilities, but the quality of the environment, how do we set up the work setting, the workplace, so that they can be successful? Examples of that, we want to make sure good information is provided, that it's clear, understandable. We want to make sure that their practices and procedures are easy to implement, that they have the tools and materials to do this well, that data systems can provide feedback, that there is encouragement provided from colleagues from the leadership team at the school and also from the district. So district is really enhance creating effective work environments. So when you look at this idea, you can see the ABCs. So if I'm looking before I implement, I need to know what it is to do. I need to know how to do it, and I need to know why I should be doing it. So I've got good information there. Once I have that information, I need to do something with it. So I need to have the time, materials, and effective procedures to actually do it. So that's a B part of the behavior. And I need to experience consequences from that. I need to know how well I'm doing. I need recognition by others that I'm doing it correctly or corrective feedback. And I need to see the impact on students. Ultimately, if this is successful for students, it's going to really help me to keep going. But if I don't see the impact of doing all this work, it's going to jeopardize, continuation. So school leadership teams can help provide that foundation. District leadership teams can really strengthen and enhance that work. So examples of providing tools. Here's one thing we've been doing within our project. When we use different assessments or facilitated process, we can create these workbooks that turn into tents. On one side, there is the question for the facilitator. So the facilitator would guide these things. It would give questions that could be asked or prompts. And on the other side that the rest of the team would see would be guiding questions. So we've got something to help support the facilitator and something to support the rest of the team. Other example, so at this district, the district actually allowed time and helped support that the school teams can get credit, continuing education credits for developing lesson plans before the school even started. So the district allowed the time and the resources so that when school starts, each educator has a plan. They've got a schedule for teaching. They've got the expectations, teaching expectation, lesson plans are all created. So it's just a way the district can help create effective learning environments. Here's the next poll. So what we talked about the leadership, we talked about professional development, and we talked about creating effective workspaces, the work environments. So when you think about this, what's the most important thing your district can do to facilitate PBIS implementation in your schools? Do you think it's, from your perspective, is it providing political support, provide priority for the PBIS work, provide training and coaching, remove barriers like demands from other initiatives, or provide guidance and feedback on implementation quality? I see a few things. The political support, the priority is important. Interesting as it spread across. And in a sense, this is kind of like a trick question. And not to throw you off, but here's the thinking, is that there could be a problem, a primary problem in one of the areas here, right? So you could go to working in a school that is not getting political support from a district. But the reality is, even though it could be a main issue in one area, it's really necessary to look at all these things together. And it's important that the district can help us do all these things because it's kind of like the package deal. So thank you for taking the time and respond to look at those things. One thing that's interesting about a multi-tiered approach, such as PBIS, is that we know we should differentiate based on need for students. We also are suggesting that the district can help us differentiate supports for educators and for groups of educators in schools based on needs. So if you think about it, it's the same idea for a continuum support, right? So universal prevention for all educators as students for the orientation for all staff. It would be important that they all know that PBIS is important to do, and we will, here's the expectations for it. And there are a few educators who may need some extra supports to help them do well. We even consider of what this might look like for supporting schools. So as group of educators in schools, there may be general support. Everyone receives that, like that orientation. But supplemental, maybe implementation teams at a school level need extra support to get back on track because there's been a change of team leadership or members leave or they're starting to drift from fidelity. So the supplemental support would be coaching with that team to get them back on track and remember what they're looking at their data. There could be focus support where it's really specific problem solving around issues that need to be addressed. And those issues could be more intensity of philosophical changes with staff. It could be that we've had, example, we've had one school that actually burned down and they had to start over again. So they had to move out and go to another school for the time and things were put on hold. They needed focus support to really get them back in place and move forward. So final thoughts for you all. District level supports. As a school, we can implement positive behavior supports, intervention supports, but it can really be enhanced through the district level. Districts can efficiently organize, distribute resources. Districts can help out with policy to guide efforts. Districts can really centralize and streamline action planning, decisions. It can allow for district administrators to promote visibility of this work and give priority to say, yeah, we need to do this. These other things are less important. We're going to help you support these most important things and provide opportunities for school teams to learn from and support each other through the process. So it's not an island of separate schools. We're all schools within the district. So we've got a few minutes here, and just want to check questions that you might have. And feel free to type in any questions or. Let's see, Kelly is typing. Okay, Kelly said, what can we do with schools who need support but don't want it? So excellent question, Kelly. So it tends to be a couple of things, right? So one is um, Ron Heifetz talks about effective leadership, and he talks about the difference between adaptive and technical. And for schools that may need support, don't want it, sometimes it's around the adaptive issues, right? They don't want it because it's feels like it's too much work. It doesn't fit with what we want for our students. Philosophically, it's not aligned. Why should I have to teach kids how to behave? For goodness sakes, they're high schoolers, right? And, all those type of things. So what we have been finding out is for schools that don't want to do it, how do we help them to understand what is it that they really want for their kids and what is the students' needs. So if you have schools that are doing really well, their students, they don't have the problem behaviors at all across the school. What we might do is to say, well, are there any students who are struggling, and how do we best support those students? And there are components that this may be helpful. Or we look at common ground that say, well, we do have struggles within our schools. The main thing is we want our kids to be successful. Then the discussion goes back to, is there anything in positive behavior intervention supports that may fit the need and align with what you want to do for outcomes? So it's kind of like that tricky walk of saying, what is this and how to do it? How do we support it? Of course, that is different if it's done from somebody from the outside versus if it's done by the district. The caution I would give, if there's a book by Aubrey Daniels, and it's looking at the power of positive reinforcement. And he cautions that if we only look at mandating things, then people will perform to a level that they won't get caught and being punished. But if we really make it that something they believe in and are supported for, they will exceed what those basic expectations. So those are some initial thoughts. Second question: superintendents can be difficult to engage at times. Are there existing informational buy-in resources out there for a particular population of education leaders? This is something that we have experienced along the way too. When we first would go in to meet with superintendents and individuals, it's very hard to have any kind of long meeting with them, right? Because there's so many things on their plate. What we have found is if we can limit our initial meeting and our first few meetings to be short, the second thing we found is that we hit it right away with understanding what they are doing, and within the district, so we can make the connections for them. We can also connect it to the need. A third thing that we have found is that we created guided notes for discussion rather than PowerPoints for superintendent level, because they have been inundated with so many presentations that they eyes glaze over sometimes. So what we do is we have the key points on a guided notes process, and then we walk through, talk them through those guided notes in more of a discussion fashion. And some of those have been very helpful, and I'm happy to share those guided notes with you if you're interested. Kim, a great discussion here that, yes, suggest they attend PBIS Leadership Forum conferences because there's multiple people there. And Valerie, yes, I will share the keynote document, guided notes. And my email is at the very beginning of the slide. So let me put that up here. So my email is right here, and I will email me and I will send that off. Anthony, you said you gave mic rights, so people can actually activate their and talk if you have questions. Is there any other questions people might have? Okay. Well, again, you have my contact information. I'd be happy to share anything beyond what we discussed today. And I really appreciate your time, and I wish you the best in communicating with your district level to support schools. Thank you.